Some women walk into a room and demand attention. I survived by becoming invisible. The espresso machine hissed like an angry snake behind the marble counter while rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Bellamy Grand Hotel. Midnight in Manhattan always looked expensive from up here. Gold reflections sliding across wet streets. Black SUVs lined outside like silent threats. Men in tailored coats stepping through the revolving doors carrying secrets worth more than my yearly salary. I adjusted the sleeve of my black uniform and lowered my eyes before another guest could mistake kindness for invitation. It happened constantly. Clara, table 6 needs their invoice. Melissa snapped from the front desk without looking at me. I nodded automatically. I always nodded. That was easier than speaking. Easier than becoming memorable. At 24 years old, I had mastered the art of being forgettable. Quiet girls survived longer in this city. Quiet girls didn't attract trouble. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself every morning before another 10-hour shift beneath chandeliers that cost more than my apartment building. The strange thing was, people still stared. Not openly. Not enough to cause a scene. But I noticed it. The lingering pauses. The softened expressions. Bellmen carrying boxes suddenly volunteering to help me with paperwork. Wealthy women smiling at me for no reason while checking into penthouses. Men trying too hard to make me laugh. Even the angry guests lowered their voices around me sometimes, like yelling too loudly near me would ruin something. I never understood why. I wasn't beautiful in the way Manhattan worshipped beauty. I didn't wear red lipstick or designer heels. My blonde hair stayed tied back in the same low bun every shift. Minimal makeup. Plain silver earrings. Background person energy. That's what my therapist used to call it after the incident 3 years ago. You learned how to disappear emotionally. She said it gently. Like disappearing wasn't something I had done to survive. The hotel doors slid open again, and cold rain-scented air swept through the lobby. Every employee straightened instantly. I noticed. Before I even looked up, the atmosphere changed first. Conversation slowed. Security guards adjusted their posture. A bartender nearly dropped a glass behind me. Then the man walked in. Adrian Moretti. Even if people pretended not to know his name, everyone in Manhattan knew his face. 34. White. Dark hair brushed back from sharp features that looked carved rather than born. Expensive charcoal coat, still damp from rain. Gray blue eyes colder than the December storm outside. He moved through the lobby surrounded by silence instead of bodyguards, which somehow felt more dangerous. Men like him didn't need to announce power. The city already been around them. I kept my head lowered and continued organizing invoices at the reception desk. That was the safest option. But then Melissa suddenly whispered beside me. Oh my God, he's coming this way. My stomach tightened. Footsteps echoed against polished marble. Slow. Controlled. Expensive leather shoes. I focused harder on the papers in my hands, even though the numbers blurred together. Coffee. A deep voice said calmly above me. Not demanding. Not rude. Somehow worse. I looked up before I could stop myself. Adrian Moretti stood directly across the counter, one hand resting beside a silver lighter and rain droplets still clinging to the collar of his coat. Up close, he looked exhausted. Not physically. Soul-deep exhausted. Like sleep hadn't touched him properly in years. His eyes met mine for exactly 1 second. Then something strange happened. He froze. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Because I spent my life studying dangerous moods before they exploded. His expression didn't soften. Men like Adrian Moretti probably forgot how to soften a long time ago. But the tension in his jaw shifted slightly. Like some invisible noise around him had suddenly gone quiet. Black coffee? I asked softly. My own voice almost disappeared beneath the rain outside. His gaze stayed on me longer than comfortable. Yeah, he said finally. Black. I turned toward the espresso machine quickly, trying to ignore the strange heaviness in the air. Behind me, nobody spoke. Even Melissa had gone silent. The machine hummed beneath my trembling fingers while steam curled upward between us. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. Not on my body. Worse. Like he was trying to understand something. When I handed him the cup, our fingers brushed for less than a second. Cold skin. Warm porcelain. His eyes narrowed slightly. Confused almost. Then one of the hotel investors approached from across the lobby wearing a forced smile and too much cologne. Mr. Moretti, he laughed nervously. Your guests are waiting upstairs. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He was still looking at me. Then his gaze shifted toward the investor. Calm. Deadly calm. Tell them to wait. The investor blinked. Sir. Adrian picked up the coffee slowly without taking his eyes off me. I said wait. And somehow, every person in the lobby obeyed the silence that followed. I told myself the shaking in my hands came from too much caffeine and not from the way Adrian Moretti had looked at me like he was trying to remember something he had never seen before. The lobby slowly returned to life after he disappeared toward the private elevators, but something still felt off. Guests laughed too loudly. Employees whispered behind computer screens. Even Melissa leaned closer to me once the elevator doors closed. What was that? She whispered. I blinked at her. What was what? Do not do that quiet thing with me right now, Clara. Adrian Moretti just delayed a meeting with investors because you handed him coffee. I lowered my eyes back to the invoices. I handed him coffee because he ordered coffee. Melissa stared another second before shaking her head. You seriously do not know what you do to people, do you? I pretended not to hear her. That question followed me most of my life. Teachers, co-workers, ex-boyfriends, therapists. They all said versions of the same thing. You calm people down. You make them softer. You make them tell you things. I never understood it because inside my own head there was nothing calming at all. Just constant noise disguised as silence. By 1:30 in the morning, the storm outside had worsened. Rain streaked across the hotel windows in silver rivers while thunder rolled. Somewhere above Manhattan, most guests had gone upstairs, leaving the lobby dim and quiet except for distant piano music drifting from the lounge bar. I was reorganizing reservation folders when a familiar voice interrupted me. Miss Bennett. I looked up too quickly. Adrian stood across the counter again, his charcoal coat gone now, dark gray dress, shirt rolled slightly at the sleeves. Without the coat, he somehow looked more dangerous. More human too. Which was worse? Sir, I asked softly. His eyes moved briefly toward the paperwork in my hands. You are still here. I work night shift. You always work this late? I nodded once. Most nights. His jaw tightened almost invisibly, like he disliked the answer for reasons neither of us understood. For a second, neither of us spoke. The silence should have been awkward. Instead, it settled around us, strangely soft compared to the tension filling the rest of the hotel. Then a loud laugh exploded from the lounge behind him. One of the finance executives staying in the penthouse section stumbled toward the desk carrying a whiskey glass and too much confidence. Mid-50s. Expensive watch. Wedding ring. The kind of man who mistook politeness for invitation. There she is, he said with a grin aimed directly at me. I was wondering where the pretty quiet girl disappeared to. My stomach tightened immediately. I recognized him. Richard Holloway. Regular guest. Always tipped too much. Always stood too close. I straightened automatically. Do you need assistance with your room, Mr. Holloway? Actually, he said, leaning one elbow against the marble counter. I was hoping you would join me upstairs for a drink after your shift. I felt Adrian go completely still beside him. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just still in the way thunderstorms pause before lightning. I appreciate the offer, I answered carefully, but I am working. Holloway laughed like I had flirted instead of declined. Come on. A beautiful girl like you should not spend every night hiding behind a desk. I hated that word. Beautiful. It never sounded safe coming from men like him. Before I could answer, Adrian finally spoke. Calm. Flat. She already said. No. Holloway blinked and turned slowly. The alcohol confidence faded from his face almost instantly once he realized who stood beside him. Mr. Moretti, he said awkwardly. I did not realize, clearly. Adrian's voice remained perfectly controlled, which somehow made the air colder. Holloway forced a laugh. I was only being friendly. Adrian looked at him for a long second. Friendly men know when someone is uncomfortable. Silence crashed down between them. The piano music from the lounge suddenly sounded very far away. Holloway adjusted his cuff nervously before stepping back from the desk. Of course. My apologies. Then he disappeared toward the elevators almost embarrassingly fast. I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. Adrian still had not moved. You did not have to do that, I whispered. His eyes shifted toward me slowly. Yes, he said. I did. Thunder rolled outside again. For a moment I noticed something strange in his expression. Not anger. Not possessiveness exactly. Recognition. Like he had finally answered a question inside his own head. His gaze lingered on me another second before dropping briefly to my hands, gripping the reservation folder too tightly. People take from quiet women, he said softly. They assume silence means permission. The words hit harder than they should have, because they sounded less like observation and more like experience. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him noticed everything. But instead of pushing further, he stepped back from the counter. You should not leave alone tonight, he said. The storm is getting worse. I take the subway. Not tonight. The way he said it made my pulse stumble slightly. Not controlling. Not demanding. Certain. Then his phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. Something dark flickered briefly behind his eyes as he glanced at the screen. Business. Trouble. Whatever kind of life existed behind those cold gray-blue eyes suddenly returning all at once. But before turning away, he looked at me one final time. Longer than necessary. Longer than safe. You make this hotel quieter, he said. Do you know that? And somehow that frightened me more than if he had threatened me. The rain still had not stopped by the time my shift ended at 3:15 in the morning. Manhattan looked drowned beneath silver streetlights and blurred reflections, every passing taxi slicing through puddles deep enough to swallow heels. I stood near the employee exit, pulling my coat tighter around myself, while cold wind slipped through the alley behind the hotel. Normally, I would have hurried straight toward the subway entrance 2 blocks away. Tonight I hesitated. Adrian Moretti's words would not leave my head. You should not leave alone tonight. I hated that they affected me. Men with power always affected people. That was how power worked. But there was something worse about him. He did not try to impress anyone. He simply expected the world to rearrange itself around his decisions. You are still here. The deep voice behind me nearly made me jump. I turned too quickly and found Adrian standing near the black SUV parked beside the curb. Rain mist clung to his dark coat, while city lights reflected against the vehicle's polished surface. 2 men stood farther behind him near the street, both dressed in black suits, pretending not to watch everything around them. Security. Or something more dangerous than security. I thought you left, I admitted softly. Adrian studied me for a second before glancing toward the empty street. Meeting ran late. His eyes returned to me. And you ignored what I said. I take the subway every night. You should not. I crossed my arms tighter against the cold. New York does not stop being dangerous because it is raining. One corner of his mouth almost moved. Not a smile exactly. More like surprise. You think I am overreacting. I think you do not know me. The silence between us stretched again, heavy with rain and distant traffic noise. Then Adrian stepped closer beneath the hotel awning. Close enough that I caught the scent of cedar, inexpensive cologne mixed with storm air. That is the problem, he said quietly. I am starting to want to. My pulse stumbled so hard it embarrassed me. I looked away immediately toward the glowing subway sign down the block. Mr. Moretti, Adrian. I work at your hotel. You work at a hotel I happen to own. His voice stayed calm. Controlled. There is a difference. I should have left then. Walked into the rain. Gone home to my tiny Queens apartment with the flickering kitchen light and radiator that sounded like it was dying every winter. But exhaustion wrapped around my body too heavily tonight. My feet hurt. My head hurt. And for reasons I could not explain, standing near him felt strangely quieter than standing alone. Adrian noticed the hesitation in my expression immediately. Of course he did. Men like him survive by reading weakness before anyone else could. I will have my driver take you home, he said. That is not necessary. No, he answered softly. It is. Before I could protest again, one of the suited men suddenly approached from the curb. Tall, dark-haired, earpiece hidden beneath his collar. He leaned toward Adrian slightly and lowered his voice. The councilman arrived upstairs early. Adrian's expression changed instantly. The softness vanished so quickly it almost felt unreal. Cold authority settled back over him like armor. Tell him he can wait another 10 minutes. Sir, he sounded impatient. Adrian's gray-blue eyes hardened slightly. Then he should learn patience. The man nodded once and stepped back without another word. I stared longer than I should have. Not because of fear exactly. Because I had never seen someone obeyed so completely before. Adrian noticed my expression and looked back toward me. Does that bother you? He asked. What? The way people listen when I speak. I swallowed slowly. People look nervous around you. Are you nervous around me, Clara? The way he said my name felt dangerous somehow. Too low. Too careful. Rain dripped steadily from the edge of the awning beside us. Somewhere down the block, a siren echoed through the city. I should have lied. Instead, I answered honestly. I do not think nervous is the right word. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. Then suddenly the employee exit behind me burst open. Melissa stepped outside carrying her purse before freezing mid-step when she noticed Adrian standing there. Beside me. Oh, she breathed awkwardly. Her eyes bounced rapidly between us. I did not realize. Adrian straightened slightly, every trace of personal emotion disappearing again behind controlled politeness. Miss Bennett was just leaving. Melissa stared another second before nodding too quickly. Right. Of course. She practically escaped into the rain. I closed my eyes briefly. Tomorrow the entire staff would probably think I was secretly involved with one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. Adrian noticed the frustration on my face immediately. You dislike attention, he observed. Attention usually comes with expectations. And what do you think I expect from you? I looked up before I could stop myself. Big mistake. His eyes locked onto mine instantly. Calm. Focused. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with physical threat and everything to do with how carefully he watched me. I do not know yet, I whispered. Adrian stepped closer one final inch beneath the dim gold light of the awning. Neither do I. Then his phone buzzed again sharply in his coat pocket. This time irritation flashed openly across his face. He pulled the phone out, glanced at the screen, and exhaled once through his nose before looking back at me. Get in the car, Clara. His voice lowered slightly. Please. And somehow that single word frightened me more than every command he had given all night. I should have said no. Any smart woman would have. Every survival instinct I had spent years building should have pushed me toward the subway instead of the black SUV waiting beside the curb. Men like Adrian Moretti belonged in headlines and whispered conversations. Not in my life. Especially not in my life. But exhaustion makes dangerous things feel reasonable sometimes. And the rain outside looked cold enough to freeze thoughts before they fully formed. So I nodded once. Adrian opened the back door himself before I could change my mind. That alone felt unsettling. Powerful men usually expected other people to handle simple things for them. The inside of the SUV smelled faintly like leather and cedar. Warm. Quiet. The city noise disappeared the moment the door shut behind me. Adrian slid into the seat across from me, while one of his men moved into the driver's seat without a word. No music played. No one spoke. Manhattan drifted past the tinted windows in blurred gold and silver reflections, while rain slid across the glass in soft rivers. I folded my hands tightly in my lap to stop myself from fidgeting. Adrian noticed immediately. You are uncomfortable. It was not a question. This is not exactly normal for me. What part? He asked calmly. The expensive car, or the billionaire who apparently terrifies half the city? One corner of his mouth almost lifted again. That tiny almost smile somehow felt more dangerous than if he had laughed openly. Only half. I looked down before my own reaction betrayed me. Silence settled between us again. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. The kind that made me hyper-aware of every breath and movement. Adrian watched people the way surgeons studied fragile things before touching them. Careful, focused, precise. It made me nervous in ways I did not fully understand. Outside, traffic slowed near Midtown as red brake lights reflected across rain-soaked streets. Adrian loosened his tie slightly, finally looking tired instead of untouchable. Queens? He asked after a moment. I blinked. How did you know? Your employee file. Of course. Heat crawled into my face unexpectedly. You looked me up? I own the hotel, he answered evenly. Background checks are standard. That should not have bothered me. Yet somehow it did. Because it felt personal now. And what did my file tell you? Adrian's gaze stayed on me. That you never call in sick. You volunteer for overnight shifts. You transferred from the Chicago location 2 years ago. My stomach tightened slightly at the mention of Chicago. Adrian noticed immediately. You do not like talking about it. There is not much to say. People who say that usually have the most to say. I looked toward the rain-streaked window before answering. Chicago taught me that quiet women get left alone more often. Adrian went still beside me. Not angry. Something worse. Understanding. That is not always true, he said softly. I hated how carefully he said things. Sometimes. Like every sentence mattered more than normal conversation should. The SUV stopped at a red light, near a late-night flower stand glowing beneath street lamps. A little girl stood beneath the awning beside buckets of white roses while her exhausted father closed the shop for the night. Adrian's eyes drifted toward them automatically, and for the first time since meeting him, something in his face softened completely. Small, brief, human. You like flowers? I asked before thinking. His eyes returned to mine slowly. My mother did. The answer surprised me. Men like Adrian Moretti did not seem real enough to have mothers who liked flowers. He noticed the shift in my expression and exhaled quietly through his nose. You expected something colder. I expected you not to notice flower stands at 2 in the morning. I notice everything. The words settled heavily between us because we both understood they were true. The driver suddenly spoke from the front seat. We are here, sir. I looked out the window and realized with confusion that we were not outside my apartment building. We were parked in front of a small 24-hour diner tucked beside a laundromat in Queens. Warm yellow lights glowed behind fogged windows. Adrian reached for the door handle calmly. Come eat something. I stared at him. You brought me to a diner? You have not eaten since before your shift started. My mouth opened slightly. How do you know that? Adrian looked almost annoyed by the question. You touched your stomach twice when guests ordered food earlier. I blinked at him speechlessly. He really did notice everything. Rain continued tapping softly against the SUV roof while the diner lights reflected gold against his gray-blue eyes. You analyze everyone like this? I asked quietly. No, then why me? Adrian held my gaze for a long moment. Long enough that my pulse started betraying me again. Because, he said softly, everyone else notices you too. The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than flirting ever could have. Because he did not sound jealous. He sounded confused. Like he was trying to solve something dangerous. Adrian stepped out into the rain first. Before opening my door again, cold air rushed around us instantly. The little bell above the diner entrance chimed softly when we stepped inside together. Warm air smelled like coffee and pancakes and fresh pie. Ordinary. Safe. But every person inside looked up when Adrian entered. The tired waitress froze mid-step. A truck driver lowered his newspaper slowly. Even the cook behind the counter straightened slightly. And somehow, Adrian never looked at any of them. Only me. The waitress almost dropped the coffee pot when Adrian walked toward the booth near the back window. Not because he raised his voice. Not because he acted important. People simply reacted to him before their brains caught up. Like animals sensing storms before thunder arrived. Mr. Moretti, the waitress said carefully, smoothing her apron with nervous hands. Adrian nodded once. Coffee for her. Chamomile tea for me. I looked at him in confusion as we slid into opposite sides of the booth. You drink tea? Another almost smile touched the corner of his mouth. I stopped sleeping properly 5 years ago. Coffee stopped helping. The waitress hurried away too quickly while I stared across the small table at the man who apparently owned half of Manhattan, yet sat in a 24-hour diner at nearly 4 in the morning drinking tea. Nothing about him made sense. Rain tapped softly against the windows beside us while neon signs reflected red and blue across polished silver napkin holders. For the first time all night, Adrian loosened slightly. Not relaxed exactly. Men like him probably forgot how to relax years ago. But quieter. Less guarded. Do you come here often? I asked softly. Sometimes after meetings. Your meetings end at 4 in the morning? The kind I attend usually do. There it was again. That subtle reminder that Adrian Moretti existed in a world I could sense, but not fully see. A dangerous world hidden beneath expensive suits and controlled expressions. The waitress returned with coffee and tea, setting everything down carefully like sudden movements might trigger something catastrophic. Adrian thanked her politely. She nearly blushed. I noticed because I always notice things. Like that. Women softened around him too. Not only men. It was strange watching power move through a room without needing volume. Adrian wrapped long fingers around the warm ceramic teacup before speaking again. You study people. I blinked. What? You observe reactions before conversations. His gray-blue eye stayed on me steadily. You noticed the waitress was nervous before she even reached the table. Heat crawled unexpectedly into my face. I do not mean to. Yes, you do. His voice remained calm. People who survive difficult things become excellent observers. The words settled heavily between us. I lowered my eyes toward the coffee cup, warming my hands. You make it sound psychological. It is psychological. I hated how easily he saw through things I spent years hiding. You do that often too, I whispered. Analyze people. Only when they interest me. My pulse betrayed me again. Outside, headlights slid through rain while the diner's old radio played soft jazz low enough to feel distant. For one strange moment, the world outside the booth disappeared completely. Then the front door chimed loudly. 3 college-aged men entered laughing too hard, soaked from the storm and smelling faintly of beer and winter air. They spotted me almost immediately. I felt it before I looked up. That shift, that attention. One of them nudged the other while glancing toward our booth. Another smiled too long in my direction before pretending to study the menu overhead. Adrian noticed every second of it. His expression did not change. Somehow that felt worse. This is what I mean, he said quietly. I frowned slightly. What? People look at you like they already know you. That does not even make sense. It does to me. I wrapped both hands tighter around the coffee cup. You are imagining things. Adrian leaned back slightly against the booth, eyes never leaving mine. No, Clara. I am noticing patterns. The calm certainty in his voice unsettled me more than jealousy would have, because he genuinely sounded confused by it, like he was trying to solve a problem no one else could see. One of the college guys suddenly approached our table holding a nervous smile. Sorry to bother you, he said to me, but I just wanted to say you have really kind eyes. My entire body tensed automatically, not because the compliment was inappropriate, because I hated strangers feeling entitled to pieces of me. Thank you, I answered softly, already hoping he would leave. Then the young man finally noticed Adrian sitting across from me fully. His confidence disappeared instantly. The air around our table shifted so sharply even I felt it. Adrian had not moved, had not spoken, yet suddenly the guy looked like he regretted every life choice leading to this booth. Sorry, he muttered quickly. Did not mean to interrupt. He walked away so fast his friends started laughing at him from the counter. Adrian watched silently until the group settled into another booth farther away. Then his eyes returned to me slowly. You looked uncomfortable. I just do not like attention. No, Adrian corrected softly. You expect attention to become dangerous eventually. My breath caught. He said it too easily, too accurately. For a second I forgot how to speak entirely. Adrian noticed immediately and exhaled quietly, almost frustrated with himself. Someone hurt your trust before Chicago, he said carefully. That is why you disappear inside yourself when men get too close. I stared at him across the booth while rain blurred the city outside into silver streaks. You do not get to know things like that about me. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. I know. Then stop acting like you understand me. His eyes darkened unexpectedly. Not anger. Something heavier. I am trying not to. The honesty in his voice hit harder than anything else tonight. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Adrian Moretti was not simply interested in me anymore. He was resisting something. And somehow, that frightened him too. The drive to my apartment felt quieter after the diner. Not because the city had calmed down. Manhattan never truly slept. Sirens still echoed through wet streets. Neon signs still bled color across rain-soaked sidewalks. But something between Adrian and me had shifted inside that tiny booth beneath fluorescent lights and burnt coffee smells. He knew too much now. Worse, I had started noticing the parts of him that did not match the rumors. Men called dangerous were not supposed to watch flower stands at 2 in the morning. They were not supposed to drink chamomile tea because they could not sleep. They definitely were not supposed to look at lonely women like they recognized something fragile in them. The SUV finally stopped outside my apartment building in Queens just after 4:30. My building looked exactly as depressing as always. Flickering front light, rusted mailbox panel, laundry sign buzzing beside the corner deli downstairs. Adrian stared out the tinted window at the cracked sidewalk and peeling paint for a long second. You live here alone? He asked quietly. I hesitated before nodding. Since Chicago. His jaw tightened slightly again. He did that whenever Chicago came up. Like the city itself offended him somehow. One of his men stepped out immediately to open my door, but Adrian spoke before I could leave. Clara. I turned back toward him. Rain reflected softly across his gray-blue eyes beneath the dim car lights outside. Tomorrow night, he said carefully. You will be moved to executive guest services upstairs. I blinked in confusion. What? Higher pay. Better hours. My stomach tightened instantly. You are changing my position? Temporarily. Without asking me. Adrian held my gaze calmly. You are overqualified for overnight reception. Heat rushed into my face unexpectedly. You do not even know me. I know enough. I stared at him through the open car door while cold rain mist drifted between us. Suddenly, the exhaustion of the entire night crashed into irritation. This is exactly what I mean. His expression remained unreadable, meaning, you decide things for people like it is normal. For the first time since meeting him, something sharp flickered behind his eyes. Not anger directed at me. Frustration. I am trying to help you. I did not ask for help. The silence after that felt heavier than anything else tonight. Rain tapped softly against the SUV roof while headlights slid past at the intersection nearby. Adrian looked away first toward my apartment building. No, he said quietly. You never would. The calm sadness in his voice hit harder than anger could have. Before I could answer, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a small black umbrella. Expensive. Minimalist. Probably worth more than my monthly grocery budget. He handed it toward me without explanation. You should keep one in this weather. I stared at the umbrella instead of taking it. Adrian, take it. Not controlling. Not cold. Worse. Gentle. I finally accepted it carefully, our fingers brushing again for the briefest second. His hand felt colder than before. Thank you, I whispered. Adrian studied me for one long moment beneath the rain-streaked city lights. Get some sleep, Clara. Then the door closed softly between us. The SUV disappeared down the street seconds later, black taillights fading into the storm while I stood frozen on the sidewalk, holding an umbrella I never asked for. The next afternoon, I woke up to 7 missed calls from Melissa. My stomach immediately tightened. I called her back while standing barefoot in my tiny kitchen waiting for coffee to brew. Please tell me you are alive, she answered dramatically. I just woke up. Clara Bennett, she practically shouted. What did you do to Adrian Moretti? I nearly dropped the coffee mug. Nothing. That man walked into the hotel this morning looking like he had not slept at all, and suddenly half the executive floor is being reorganized because of you. My stomach sank. Melissa, do you know how many people have been trying to get transferred upstairs for years? She lowered her voice dramatically. And apparently Mr. Moretti personally requested you. I leaned against the kitchen counter slowly. I did not ask him to. I know you did not. That is what makes this insane. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm, too quiet. Melissa, I whispered carefully, what are people saying? She hesitated. That he noticed you. Those 4 words should not have affected me so much. But they did. Because deep down, that was exactly what frightened me. All my life I survived by becoming emotionally invisible. Easy to overlook. Easy to forget. Adrian Moretti looked at me like invisibility had personally offended him. By 8 that evening I stood inside the executive floor lobby, wearing a new black uniform tailored sharper than the old one. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan 70 stories below, while crystal chandeliers reflected gold across polished marble. Everything smelled expensive and cold. Melissa adjusted my sleeve nervously. You look incredible. I felt trapped. I look noticeable. That is because you are. Before I could answer, the private elevator doors opened softly across the lobby. Every employee immediately straightened. My pulse stumbled before I even looked up. Adrian stepped out wearing a dark navy suit that made the silver in his watch gleam beneath chandelier light. But it was not his appearance that unsettled me. It was the exhaustion in his face. Faint shadows beneath his eyes. Tension still lingering in his shoulders like sleep never fully found him. Then his gaze lifted and landed directly on me. Everything around us seemed to pause again. Employees stopped moving. Conversations quieted. Even Melissa slowly stepped backward beside me. Adrian looked at me for one long second before exhaling softly through his nose. Relief. Actual relief. Like seeing me somehow settled something restless inside him. And that terrified me more than anything else yet. People reacted strangely to relief when it appeared on Dangerous Men. That was the first thing I thought when Adrian looked at me across the executive lobby, like seeing me had finally allowed him to breathe properly. Because relief meant attachment. Attachment meant vulnerability. And men with power rarely survived vulnerability for long. The chandelier light reflected softly across polished marble floors, while wealthy guests drifted through the lobby, carrying designer luggage and conversations worth millions of dollars. Yet somehow the entire room still felt quieter the moment Adrian stepped out of that elevator. His attention stayed locked on me as he crossed the lobby slowly. Employees moved aside automatically. Nobody told them to. They simply did. Miss Bennett. His voice was calm again. Controlled. Like the brief crack of emotion from seconds ago had never happened. Mr. Moretti. I hated how formal my voice sounded around him sometimes. Like I needed distance just to think clearly. Adrian's eyes drifted over the new uniform briefly before returning to my face. The color suits you. Heat touched my cheeks immediately. Melissa nearly choked beside me, trying not to react. I ignored her completely. Thank you. A silence stretched between us again. Heavy. Observant. Dangerous in ways no one else in the room seemed to fully understand. Then Adrian finally looked toward Melissa. Miss Carter. Melissa straightened instantly. Sir. I need Clara upstairs tonight. My stomach tightened. Upstairs. Adrian's gaze shifted back toward me. Private event. Political donors. International investors. His jaw tightened slightly. Too many men pretending to be civilized. Melissa wisely disappeared almost immediately after that. Coward. Adrian motioned toward the private elevator calmly. Come with me. Is that a request? I asked before thinking. One corner of his mouth almost moved again. Do requests from me make you nervous? You never sound unsure enough for them to feel optional. Something softer flickered briefly behind his eyes before he pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open soundlessly. I followed him inside mostly because refusing in front of half the staff somehow felt impossible now. The elevator rose smoothly toward the top floors while Manhattan glittered beneath us through the glass wall behind him. Adrian loosened his cuff slightly without looking at me. You are angry. You transferred my entire job position without asking. You were unhappy downstairs. That was still my decision to make. The elevator remained painfully quiet for 2 full seconds. Then Adrian finally looked toward me fully. You are correct. The immediate apology startled me enough that I forgot my frustration for a second. Men like Adrian Moretti were not supposed to admit fault easily. He noticed my surprise instantly. Do not look so shocked. You actually listened. I always listen to you. The sincerity in his voice made my pulse stumble again. Before I could answer, the elevator doors opened onto the private executive floor. The atmosphere upstairs felt completely different from the hotel below. Softer lighting, dark wood walls, expensive art hanging between quiet security personnel wearing tailored black suits. Everything smelled faintly like whiskey, cedar, and old money. Adrian walked beside me through the hallway while conversations drifted from private conference rooms nearby. Men in expensive suits stopped talking when they saw him pass. Some looked nervous, others respectful. A few looked afraid. Adrian ignored all of them. Sir, one of the security men approached carefully. Councilman Hayes arrived early. Adrian's expression cooled immediately, and he requested the new guest services attendant personally. My stomach dropped slightly. Adrian stopped walking. The air around us shifted instantly colder. Requested? The guard hesitated. He described her. Silence. Sharp silence. Adrian looked toward the conference room doors at the far end of the hallway with an expression so calm it became unsettling. No, just one word. Quiet. Final. The guard nodded immediately. Understood. Adrian continued walking again beside me like nothing happened. My pulse had not recovered. What exactly does that mean? I asked softly. Nothing you need to worry about. Adrian. He glanced toward me briefly. It means someone upstairs noticed you. A strange chill slid down my spine. You say that like it is dangerous. Sometimes it is. We stopped outside a set of dark double doors leading into one of the private lounges. Through the glass I could see wealthy men gathered around crystal tumblers and low conversations. Political smiles. Expensive watches. Predatory eyes disguised by manners. Adrian looked toward me carefully. You do not need to stay longer than necessary. You brought me here, and I am already reconsidering it. Before I could answer, the doors opened suddenly. An older man stepped into the hallway wearing a navy suit and silver cufflinks. Mid-60s. Powerful posture. Cold smile. His eyes landed on me instantly, and lingered. I felt it immediately. That familiar discomfort. The kind that made my shoulders tense before. My brain caught up. Well, the man said smoothly. That explains the distraction. Adrian stepped slightly closer to me before speaking. Not touching, just enough to block part of the man's view. Councilman Hayes. The councilman smiled slowly while still watching me. You always did have expensive taste, Adrian. Every instinct inside me tightened instantly, because the way Adrian's expression changed after those words did not look jealous. It looked protective, and somehow, that felt far more dangerous. The hallway suddenly felt too small after Councilman Hayes looked at me like I was something he intended to acquire, instead of a person standing 3 feet away. I had seen that look before. In Chicago, in bars, in office buildings, in the eyes of men who mistook quietness for weakness and kindness for availability. But Adrian's reaction beside me felt different from anything I had experienced before. He did not look jealous. He looked alert, like something valuable had been left unguarded for too long. "You never mentioned your executive staff looked like this," Hayes said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks while still watching me. Adrian's expression remained perfectly calm. "Because my staff is not part of the conversation." The older man smiled faintly. "Everything becomes part of the conversation eventually." A strange tension settled in the hallway. Not loud, not obvious. The kind, powerful men buried beneath politeness and expensive tailoring. I instinctively shifted one small step backward. Adrian noticed immediately. Of course he did. His shoulders tightened almost invisibly before he turned toward me instead of Hayes. "Clara." His voice lowered slightly, softer than before. "Would you bring the Bordeaux from the lounge?" The request surprised me, mostly because it sounded like an excuse. An exit. I nodded once immediately. Of course. I walked toward the private lounge doors, trying not to feel the weight of Hayes' stare following me the entire time. The moment the doors closed behind me, I finally exhaled properly. Warm golden light filled the room while low jazz drifted from hidden speakers near the ceiling. Crystal glasses reflected across. Polished black tables surrounded by wealthy men pretending their conversations did not shape entire cities. I moved toward the wine display near the back wall, fingers tightening slightly around the silver tray I carried. "You okay?" I looked up quickly. A younger man stood near the bar counter watching me carefully. Early 30s. Brown hair. Expensive suit without the arrogance most expensive suits carried. I recognized him vaguely from television interviews. Ethan Brooks. One of Manhattan's youngest financial investors. "I am fine," I answered automatically. Ethan studied me another second before glancing toward the hallway doors. "Hayes makes people uncomfortable." The honesty surprised me enough that I looked at him fully for the first time. "You noticed?" One corner of his mouth lifted sadly. "Most people notice. They just like his money more than they dislike his behavior." I looked down toward the wine bottle labels again. "That sounds exhausting." "The city is exhausting." His voice softened slightly. "You do not seem like you belong in rooms like this." Before I could answer, another voice cut smoothly across the lounge. "Neither do you." Adrian. Every conversation in the room seemed to quiet slightly when he entered. Not because he demanded attention, because attention followed him automatically. Adrian crossed the lounge toward us with slow, controlled steps, while Ethan immediately straightened beside the bar. "Moretti," Ethan greeted calmly. Adrian nodded once before his gaze landed on me instantly. Relief flickered there again. Small, fast, but real. Ethan noticed it too. I could tell by the way his expression shifted slightly. "Councilman Hayes was looking for your employee," Ethan said carefully. Adrian's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "I am aware." Silence settled awkwardly for 1 second too long. Then Ethan finally lifted both hands slightly. "Understood." He stepped away toward another group near the windows without another word. Adrian watched him leave before turning toward me fully. "Did he bother you?" "No, did Hayes?" My fingers tightened around the wine bottle slightly. Adrian noticed immediately. "Clara." I hated how gently he said my name sometimes, like he already knew the answer before asking. I just do not like men staring at me like they already decided something. Adrian went completely still beside me. The jazz music suddenly sounded very far away. That happens often. The careful calmness in his voice made my stomach tighten unexpectedly. I looked away toward the glowing Manhattan skyline outside the windows. More often than you think. Silence stretched between us again. Heavy, thoughtful, dangerous. Then Adrian stepped closer beside the wine display, lowering his voice enough that only I could hear. "Do you know what I realized the first night I saw you?" I swallowed slowly. "What?" His gray-blue eyes stayed locked on mine. "Men do not notice you because you are loud. Another step closer. Or because you ask for attention." The room around us blurred strangely beneath the chandelier lights. They notice you because you make them feel calm. My pulse stumbled hard against my ribs. Adrian's expression tightened slightly, like admitting this frustrated him somehow. You walk into rooms carrying peace while the rest of us carry noise. His eyes search mine carefully, and men become selfish around peace. The honesty in his voice hit harder than flirting ever could have, because he sounded angry at himself for understanding it. Adrian, I am the worst one of them. The confession landed softly between us while jazz music drifted through the glowing lounge and rain streaked silver across the windows 70 stories above Manhattan. My breath caught completely, because for the first time since meeting him, Adrian Moretti did not sound powerful. He sounded afraid. For one impossible second, the most powerful man I had ever met looked at me like he was losing a battle no one else could see. The confession settled heavily between us while rain traced silver lines down the executive lounge windows and soft jazz drifted through the air like smoke. I should have stepped away. Any smart woman would have. Men like Adrian Moretti did not belong near ordinary lives. They consumed things, controlled things, changed things permanently. Yet somehow I stayed exactly where I was. Maybe because, underneath the expensive suits and terrifying reputation, I kept catching glimpses of exhaustion so deep it felt human. Adrian looked away first, jaw tightening slightly like he regretted saying too much. You should go home after tonight, he said quietly. This floor is not good for you. I blinked slowly. You transferred me here. That was before I realized certain people would notice you this quickly. And now, his eyes returned to mine, storm gray beneath chandelier light. Now I am trying to decide whether proximity to me protects you or endangers you more. The honesty nearly took my breath away. Before I could answer, voices rose near the far side of the lounge. Laughter, glasses clinking. Councilman Hayes stepping through the crowd with the relaxed confidence of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. His eyes found me immediately again. Adrian noticed too. The entire atmosphere around him shifted subtly colder. Hayes approached with a polished smile. There you are. I instinctively stepped backward before realizing what I was doing. Adrian moved at the same moment, not touching me, just repositioning himself slightly between us again. Hayes smiled faintly at the gesture. You are becoming territorial, Adrian. You are becoming inappropriate. The calmness in Adrian's voice made the words land harder somehow. Hayes chuckled like this was all entertainment. Relax. I only wanted to invite Miss Bennett to tomorrow's charity dinner. My stomach tightened instantly. That will not be necessary, Adrian answered before I could speak. Hayes raised one eyebrow slowly. I was asking her. Silence. Dangerous silence hidden beneath perfect manners and crystal chandeliers. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. No, he said calmly. You were testing me. The older man's smile faded just enough to reveal something sharper underneath. Interesting. He looked toward me again. You must be very special. I hated the way he said special, like ownership disguised as admiration. Excuse me, I whispered softly before either man could continue. Then I walked out of the lounge before my nerves completely betrayed me. The executive hallway felt colder now, quieter. I moved quickly toward the private elevator, trying to slow my breathing. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls. Pale cheeks, tense shoulders, eyes that looked overwhelmed in ways no amount of silence could hide anymore. The elevator doors opened behind me before I reached them. Adrian stepped out into the hallway alone. No security, no audience, just him. Clara. I stopped walking but did not turn around immediately. I am tired, I admitted quietly. Footsteps approached slowly behind me. I know. I do not understand any of this. The confession sounded smaller than I intended. Softer, honest in ways that scared me. Adrian stopped beside me near the windows, overlooking Manhattan 70 stories below. The city glowed beneath us like spilled gold across black water. Neither do I, he said after a moment. I finally looked toward him fully. That is not true. You always seem like you know exactly what you are doing. A faint, tired smile touched his mouth. Real this time. Sat around the edges. That is because most people only see the version of me built for survival. The words settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Adrian leaned one shoulder lightly against the window beside us, eyes drifting toward the city below. Do you know the first thing powerful men lose? He asked quietly. What? Peace. His gaze shifted back toward me slowly. Eventually, everyone around you wants something. Money, influence, protection. A pause. Control. The soft city light reflected across his face, making him suddenly look less like a feared businessman and more like a man carrying exhaustion too long alone. Then you walked into the lobby carrying coffee in silence, he said quietly. And for 5 minutes, my head stopped hurting. My breath caught completely. Because he sounded sincere. Not manipulative. Not charming. Honest. Dangerous honesty. The hallway suddenly felt very small around us. Adrian looked at me carefully, almost cautiously now, like I was the fragile thing instead of him. You should stay away from me, he whispered. My pulse stumbled hard against my ribs. Do you want me to? For the first time since meeting him, Adrian hesitated. Actual hesitation. His gray-blue eyes searched mine with an intensity that made the city disappear around us entirely. Then very slowly, he stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough that I could feel warmth beneath the coldness he carried everywhere else. That, he said softly, is the problem. Somewhere far below us, Manhattan continued moving through rain and light and endless noise. But standing there beside Adrian Moretti, I realized something terrifying. The most dangerous man in the city was not looking at me like he wanted to own me anymore. He was looking at me like he was afraid to lose me before he even had the right to keep me.